80 years on, the chilling mystery of Adolf Hitler's wealth has hovered over the aftermath of history's darkest era, sparking new debates and investigations with every passing decade. The shadow of his fortune stretches from the corridors of Berlin to the vaults of Switzerland, and from devastated palaces to the offices of Bavarian bureaucrats. When the Third Reich crumbled in 1945, Hitler's personal fortune, rumoured at over 700 million Reichsmarks, equivalent to $5 billion in today's money, seemed to evaporate. No well-guarded vault was left to discover, no legitimate heirs came forward, and there was no clear trace of its fate. But now, fresh revelations have reignited the search for the forbidden Nazi fortune, and they raise urgent questions historians cannot ignore. Where on earth did Hitler's money go? Who, if anyone, controls its scattered remnants today? And with so much still unaccounted for, could a cache of riches or secret bank accounts resurface when we least expect it? The answers investigators and researchers have found while diving into Hitler's lost billions are more shocking and more disturbing than anyone imagined. Adolf Hitler's transformation from a struggling Viennese artist to supreme dictator of Nazi Germany remains one of the most infamous stories in human history. Yet few realize that he also became one of the richest men of his era, amassing personal wealth on a scale that rivals the greatest fortunes of all time. Born in 1889 to a modest family in rural Austria, Hitler's earliest years were shaped by poverty and ambition. Rejected by the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, an event that haunted him his whole life, he existed in the margins, spending bitterly cold nights in crowded homeless shelters and scraping together meagre funds by painting watercolors and postcards for passing tourists. By 1913, the young, frustrated artist moved to Munich, supported only by a small inheritance from his father and an orphan's pension so slight it barely kept him from starvation. But Hitler's true transformation began not with art or inheritance, but in the chaos and uncertainty of post-World War I Germany. The failed beer hall putsch of 1923 landed Hitler in prison, a setback that provided the opportunity to write his infamous manifesto, Mein Kampf. At first, the book was largely ignored, yet as the Nazis gained power in the early 1930s, Mein Kampf became a political and cultural weapon. It was required reading for newlyweds and loyal party members alike. Its royalties soared, transforming Hitler from penniless agitator to multimillionaire overnight. At the peak, Mein Kampf allegedly earned him over $12 million a year in inflation-adjusted terms, an incomprehensible amount for the troubled interwar period. But royalties were just the tip of the iceberg. Hitler's rise to power brought him two grand government salaries, first as Chancellor, then as President, once Hindenburg died. In a masterstroke of bureaucratic manipulation, Hitler exempted himself from all tax obligations, ordering officials at the Munich tax office to erase over 400,000 Reichsmarks in unpaid taxes. That act alone marked him as untouchable. He became above the law, outside the system, set apart in a way no modern leader had achieved. Historian Ian Kershaw and journalist Ingo Helm document how, by 1934, Hitler was completely tax-exempt, a move unprecedented in Germany's history. From then on, the financial floodgates opened. Beyond government salaries and royalties, Hitler received lavish gifts and donations from Germany's titans of industry. Magnates like Fritz Thyssen and Gustav Krupp funneled enormous sums into Nazi party coffers, often disguised as charitable gifts or consulting fees. For some, these donations bought influence and protection. For others, they were the price paid to prevent persecution or to curry favor with the regime. Both Jewish and non-Jewish businesses paid up, not necessarily for privilege, but for survival itself. These vast slush funds and forced contributions were used to bankroll Hitler's personal luxury projects, palatial estates like the Berghof, a posh Munich apartment, and even the infamous Eagle's Nest, constructed as a birthday gift for Hitler, perched high atop the mountains as a monument to absolute power. At the height of Nazi dominance, Hitler enjoyed a lifestyle far removed from the average German. While most citizens endured rationing, privation, and fear, Hitler surrounded himself with opulence. He amassed thousands of looted artworks and priceless artifacts from nearly every country the Nazis overran, with the intent to build a super museum in Linz to glorify his legacy. The Linz project, which would have displayed art plundered from across Europe, was designed to dwarf any cultural institution in the world. He diversified his holdings into foreign bank accounts, particularly in neutral Switzerland, leveraging strict secrecy laws to hide millions from prying eyes. Historians estimate that as much as a third of Hitler's fortune was kept in Swiss banks, protected by coded accounts and the quiet complicity of well-paid intermediaries. Yet even as Hitler's grip tightened on Europe's wealth, the looming disaster of war began to cast long shadows over his fortune. As Allied forces closed in and the fate of the Third Reich shifted from luxury to survival, Hitler's priorities began to change. He ordered trusted lieutenants and secretaries to transfer assets out of Germany, moving cash, gold, and art across borders in preparation for the endgame. The legal and logistical effort involved was staggering. Safe houses filled with artwork, hidden bank accounts in Switzerland and Liechtenstein, and shipments of valuables lost in the fog of war. Where did all this money go as the Reich collapsed? Who could claim the fortune when its owner and the very state itself ceased to exist in the chaos of defeat? Inside Hitler's inner circle, panic replaced bravado as 1943 drew to a close. The regime's survival seemed increasingly impossible, and key figures scrambled to protect themselves and their own interests. Hitler's longtime business manager, Max Amann, oversaw streams of revenue, Mein Kampf royalties, multiple government salaries, misappropriated funds, image royalties, and secret donations that were all spread across a network of covert accounts and front organizations. Legal documents and surviving eyewitnesses confirm that Hitler was obsessed with moving valuables into neutral countries, focusing especially on Switzerland's unparalleled privacy and security. He invested heavily in precious metals, foreign bonds, and the surreptitious sale and transfer of looted artwork. But as World War II investigators and historians would learn, the Nazi state was built for disappearing paper trails. In the spring of 1945, as the Red Army approached Berlin, Hitler's most loyal supporters systematically destroyed records by burning documents, erasing account numbers, and eliminating evidence. Key financial handlers, including Martin Bormann, either vanished or died under mysterious circumstances. Last-minute purges wiped Swiss records and closed coded accounts, further obscuring the truth. In the chaos, enormous sums simply faded from the historical ledger, feeding decades of speculation and myth-making. Adding to the confusion, Hitler's last will and testament became an unsolvable legal riddle. Dictated inside the Führer bunker just hours before his suicide, Hitler declared, "What I own, as far as it is worth anything, belongs to the party. Should this no longer exist, the German state. Should the state also be destroyed, there is no need for a further decision on my part." Within days, the Nazi Party ceased to exist, and the German Reich was split and occupied, and that collapse triggered an unprecedented legal limbo. Historians and lawyers spent decades debating whether any entity could lay claim to Hitler's assets, fueling conspiracy theories, legal battles, and sensational headlines across the world. The race to find the missing fortune began the moment the war ended. Allied occupation forces combed through bombed-out cities and shattered estates, eager to locate anything of value. Soviet agents seized art and valuables in their sector, while American and British investigators struggled to untangle a web of shell corporations, secret bank accounts, and false identities. Newly formed governments in West and East Germany joined the treasure hunt, seeking Nazi resources not only for restitution, but also for vital reconstruction. In 1946, multiple copies of Hitler's will surfaced and were treated as historical curiosities rather than binding legal documents. No one wished to honor the last wishes of Europe's most reviled dictator. Yet with Hitler technically registered as a resident of Bavaria, the legal authority over what assets remained eventually defaulted to the Bavarian government. So what exactly did these assets include? Allied and German authorities began to seize the following: property holdings, Hitler's residences, such as the luxurious Berghof, which was destroyed soon after Hitler's death by bombing, his Munich apartment, the partially completed Poznan Palace, and other lesser-known locations used for safekeeping art or as retreat houses. In some cases, local citizens looted these properties before Allied teams arrived, adding another layer of confusion. Art collection. At least several thousand masterpieces were stolen from museums, galleries, and private collectors across Nazi-occupied Europe. Some pieces, like the Ghent altarpiece, were found and returned to their original owners by the Monuments Men, a group of Allied art experts assigned to recover looted art. Yet many other treasures vanished into black markets, private hands, or remain lost to this day, sometimes surfacing at high-profile auctions or hidden in Swiss vaults. Bank accounts and foreign deposits. The full scale of Hitler's holdings in Switzerland was never completely revealed. While some funds were returned to the post-war German states, much faded into legal grey zones, coded accounts whose owners were never identified, or assets converted into bearer bonds or transferred to foreign shell companies. Skeptics and investigative journalists argue that millions remain hidden, perhaps beyond recovery. Royalties and copyrights. Mein Kampf royalties continued to flow from international sales for years after 1945. In Germany, the rights ultimately reverted to the Bavarian state, which fiercely suppressed new publications until copyright expired in the 2010s. Elsewhere, particularly in the United States, royalties seized under the Trading with the Enemy Act were redirected to refugee charities, a rare instance where the proceeds of Hitler's propaganda were used for good. The story of Hitler's lost fortune became a saga of breakthroughs and setbacks. In the decades following the war, sporadic discoveries such as dormant Swiss accounts still earning interest on Mein Kampf royalties triggered headlines and renewed the chase. Bavarian officials attempted to confiscate or redistribute what they could, while Allied powers repatriated artworks and hunted for missing Nazi gold. But the full value of Hitler's assets remains elusive. Astonishingly, the legal question of inheritance did not die with Hitler. Paula Hitler, his only surviving sister, stepped forward to claim what she considered her legitimate share. Her decades-long battle with authorities became a footnote in post-war history. It was only resolved in 1960, a mere 5 months after her death, when the Bavarian government quietly granted her 2/3 of Hitler's known estate. In reality, what she received was a fraction of his true fortune, diluted by loss, looting, and endless bureaucracy. Meanwhile, the Allied governments pursued sweeping restitution. The US seized over $250,000 in Mein Kampf royalties, distributing them to Jewish refugee agencies as a small but symbolic act of post-war justice. Other funds were funneled to public interest projects in post-war Germany or allocated to art recovery initiatives. But the majority of Hitler's fortune, hundreds of millions, was lost forever, erased by bombings, looting, bureaucratic confusion, or quietly appropriated by those who outlasted the regime. In the aftermath, historians caution that the true story may never be fully told. Records destroyed, handlers missing, and shell companies scattered across continents make the fate of Hitler's wealth nearly impossible to reconstruct. But what survives confirms the destructive power of unchecked greed, accumulated through violence and deception, scattered by war, and buried beneath the ruins of a shattered Europe. As post-war Germany struggled to rebuild, a new tragedy unfolded. Restitution battles for lost property and stolen art dragged on for generations. Survivors of the Holocaust, their children and grandchildren, fought for the return of treasures looted by the Nazis, sometimes with success but often facing insurmountable legal obstacles. The process of recovery became a profound journey of remembrance. For families, the rediscovery of a painting, sculpture, or heirloom was not just a material victory, but a restoration of dignity and history. Even now, several pieces from Hitler's personal collection continue to surface in auctions and estate sales, raising new questions every time. Some suspect that Nazi loyalists and their descendants may still possess assets worth millions. Investigative journalists and documentary filmmakers regularly uncover clues, such as coded bank ledgers, secret storage facilities, and tantalizing traces of missing Nazi riches. Each new find sparks global headlines and renewed calls for accountability. The full truth of Hitler's fortune emerges from the battered ruins of post-war Germany, a tale of staggering greed, immense privilege, and ultimate dissolution. His billions, once symbols of unrestrained power, were shattered by conflict, seized piecemeal by new regimes, frittered away by chaos, and quite literally bombed into oblivion. What could be recovered, from estates to artwork to cash, largely ended up with the Bavarian government or was allocated in restitution to victims and refugees. The rest, forbidden and tantalizing, simply vanished into obscurity, fueling decades of speculation and the unending allure of hidden treasures. This journey into Hitler's personal fortune is much more than a historical curiosity. It stands as a blunt warning. When absolute power and unchecked wealth become intertwined, the end result is nearly always catastrophe. The story is an epic of ambition and destruction, a tragic cycle where greed leaves only ruins and unanswered questions. Yet even as time marches on, tantalizing mysteries remain. Could new discoveries, perhaps a lost vault or previously unknown account, rewrite our understanding of the dictator's wealth? Is there a masterpiece, a trove of gold, or a secret cache still waiting to be unearthed in some forgotten stronghold or anonymous bank? Investigators, historians, and even amateur treasure hunters continue the search, driven by the hope that the final piece may yet appear. The legacy of Hitler's missing fortune is complex. It carries the weight of atrocity, greed, and the profound ethical debates that continue to shape our world. For many, the ongoing quest is not just about money or art, but about justice, memory, and the pledge that the lessons of history will not be buried or forgotten. If the dark secrets of wartime fortunes and lost history captivate you, subscribe for more deep dive investigations into the untold stories of World War II. Like this video if you found it fascinating, and comment below with your questions, theories, or personal connections to this incredible mystery. Don't forget to watch the next video, Nazi Gold Train Finally Found After 80 Years, and see what is inside that will shock the world.